As always, I have several announcements and deals from Renegade University to announce. First of all, we have 3 webinars that you should know about. We have Carol Queen teaching A World of Desires, Sexual Diversity in the Postmodern Age. That will be a 3-session webinar beginning in late June. That's only 1 credit, and with that credit, you also get Carol's streaming video course, Sex Positivity, beautifully shot in San Francisco. So go to renegadeuniversity.com/courses to see that and to enroll. Also, coming up, we have Ben Burgess teaching Logic and Politics, How to Make an Argument. That begins June 1st. Sign up for that now. That is going to be an incredible intellectual tour de force. And speaking of intellectual tour de forces, there will be none better than the great Daniel McCarthy's 5-part webinar on the history and philosophy of conservatism at Renegade University. That begins late June. There is an early bird special. It's only 2 credits now, even though it meets 5 times, and it will increase to 3 credits shortly thereafter. So go to renegadeuniversity.com/courses and enroll now to get those deals. The big news, though, is we have just announced, finally, after the lockdown, our next Renegade University weekend, and this is the biggest and best RU weekend we have ever had. It features 5 superstar special guests. That is Scott Horton, Hotep Jesus, Cody Wilson, Deirdre McCluskey, and Jack of the Perfume Nationalist. If you are a fan of this show, you are a fan of all of those people most likely, and you need to come to this event. It's RU Texas. It meets October 8th to the 10th. It's in Lockhart, which is just south of Austin. We have hotels picked out for you right there, walking distance from the venue. Lockhart is also the barbecue capital of Texas. It was deemed that by the Texas State Legislature, so you know it's real. There are three classic barbecue places within walking distance of the venue, but look at that lineup. For 2.5 days, including a VIP dinner on Friday night, we're going to be hanging out with the smartest, most interesting, most radical, and most courageous people you will ever find. RU Texas. Go there. Go to renegadeuniversity.com/Texas. renegadeuniversity.com/Texas to get your tickets. You can either buy the VIP, which gives you access to the Friday night events with all the special guests, or you can get the general admission, which gives you access to everything that goes on Saturday and Sunday. This is going to be historic for RU, and I think for a lot of the people who come. In fact, I'm quite sure of it. I'll see you in class. renegadeuniversity.com. Thank you. Thank you so much to Headspace, the wonderful meditation app that changed my life, for sponsoring Unregistered. You can go to headspace.com/renegade to get the exact same 1-month free trial that got me started 6 years ago and changed my life. Again, go to headspace.com/renegade and start meditating with Headspace. Thank you. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that for more than a year now, I have felt all alone. I have felt all alone when I've seen people by themselves in their cars wearing masks. I have felt all alone when I've been yelled at on beaches, on hiking trails, and on wide open city streets for not wearing a mask in public. I have felt all alone when I know what the virus doesn't do to children, but I still see parents putting masks on their 2-year-old children. I have felt really alone when the mass media has consistently, relentlessly told me that the only way to get through this is to force everyone to take a vaccine that was approved on an emergency basis. Now, the good news is that even though I have felt all alone, I've also known that there are other people in the world, they just don't live near me, who see the world somewhat the way that I do, and who have been offering different information, different facts, different analyses, different evidence, and have told different stories. What we need, those of us who have felt all alone during this catastrophe, during this pandemic of panic, during this hysteria, is a movie told from our point of view that tells the story, not just of the pandemic, but of the worldwide global response to it. And a movie that is made by professionals who will do it well. Our story has to be told. This information has to be put into the public record, and we need to do it correctly. And so that's why I'm asking you to support this week's guests. They are two filmmakers who we will call A and S because if it is revealed what they were doing, they will likely lose their very careers as filmmakers. They are making a film that is our film about COVID, about the response, about the lockdowns, about the masking, about the science, in ways that you'll never hear from the mainstream media. Support them and listen to this episode. This is my interview with A and S. I am joined today by two people who must remain anonymous because they would like to continue their careers in the filmmaking industry. So I will call them by their initials. So I am joined by S from Northern California and A from Nevada. Welcome, S and A.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
It's as I said to you guys just 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago before we started recording, it is quite a bit like talking to two gay guys or two communists in the 1950s. You really, if you reveal your identity, you will almost certainly be blackballed, will you not?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, I think both of us and other members of our team have large corporate clients who, if they saw that we were producing this film, would gently let us know that they found somebody else to handle the aspects of the film industry that we're involved in. And kind of like you said, our experience certainly is that we have to have hushed conversations with those that we share ideologies with, because otherwise it creates very uncomfortable situations.
Yeah. Is that comport with your experience, A? Do you think that you would be blackballed going forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about Los Angeles, Hollywood is that all the cliches are true. It's all about who you know. It's all about constant communication. And I mean, the groupthink of Los Angeles is thick. And even just having, it doesn't have to be very hardcore ideologies or and whatnot. It can just be you just have an opinion on something that doesn't go with the main way of thinking, and you just sort of debate it lightly like you would anywhere else in the country, and you can pretty much correlate that to a lack of phone calls in the following months or so. Like you really notice that there's sort of purity tests in terms of the conversational subjects, comes up early, they sort of, you feel like you're being sort of vetted, and you either have to kind of keep your mouth shut and or play a delicate game with diplomatic language. And and you notice that it really does affect how much you work, depending on how cautious you are. And it doesn't have to be anything terribly incendiary. It can just be they just want to know that you're fully in the tank.
So your movie that you're working on, A Celebration of the Third Reich, that has nothing to do with it. Yeah, no, it's actually really, really astonishing that all you're doing is making a movie that is calling into question the policies enacted in response to a pandemic. And you will be blackballed, and you will be shut off of YouTube, and you will be ostracized socially, and at least in LA, in the circles you operate in. It's amazing that you are being treated essentially like homosexuals and communists were in the 1950s.
Yeah,
and you're not making a movie celebrating Hitler. You're making a movie that is critical of government policies toward a pandemic, which is a very ordinary thing to do. At least it used to be that kind of thing. There used to be a left that used to do just this, a left wing, right? The left wing used to do investigative, hard-hitting journalism and filmmaking on things like the Vietnam War and Watergate and all sorts of corporate corruption. And it was celebrated. And now it's not only not celebrated, it is not allowed. And they won't allow you to even have a career if you choose to do that. Am I overstating it?
I don't think so. Unfortunately, I was recently a couple of months back had a meeting for a project in LA, and there were a number of people in the room. Everybody was wearing masks, and there were a couple of people that I knew shared my perspective on this, being skeptical of the government policies. And we basically had to have our masked conversations over in corners, looking over our shoulders, making sure we weren't overheard saying that we think this is nonsense. And the fear was being doxxed, being exposed, and like you say, having significant career consequences as a result.
All right, so let's talk about this. So you guys are part of Sound Mind Creative. That's your organization or your group.
Sound Mind Creative Group.
Sound Mind Creative Group, which is it's your production company. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's the name you're using, and because you don't want to be doxxed, right? And so you talk a bit about who you guys are in terms of just your credentials in the industry. Just how long have you been around in Hollywood, and what kinds of movies have you been a part of? You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been filmmaking for over 20 years. Did a lot of work in the commercial side for a long time. Worked on, many hundreds of commercials over the years, with wearing many hats. Was in the writing game on the television side for quite a long time, working with the guild and whatnot. And then I've worked on I've worked with Disney, worked with Warner. We call it, when you work for Disney, it's a rather blue joke, or it's a rather off-color joke, but we call it, working for the mouse, which is also often affectionately called working for Mauschwitz. So it's a tough studio to work for, but I worked for them for a long time. And apologies for the nature of the joke, but worked for Warner Brothers for a long time, sold a lot of stuff to Warner Brothers, and so just kind of did the journeyman experience as the above the line sort of director, writer process, and then but then also developed a lot of clients in the corporate side and nonprofit side, doing documentaries, and fortunately with YouTube, those became much more viable project. So have just been like a lot of journeyman filmmakers. It's easy to kind of say, everyone wants to know, oh, what are the credits, but most of the stuff I worked on never aired, or aired for a few times, or people have never heard of it. I mean, for every 10 lucky scripts that get sold, maybe one or two of them get made, and of the one or two get made, or they say 4 get made, 1 gets aired, and then maybe 1 in 100 actually becomes a hit. So there's this whole world within the world we're in where you have a lot of people with a lot of experience who aren't necessarily on a project that's hit big that you may have heard of.
Oh, sure.
So I have the whole, there's projects you've heard of that I've worked on. There's also a lot of projects I've worked on that you haven't heard on. So we're kind of, that's part of the reason for SoundMind Creative Group, because we want to give those types of journeymen the sort of here's a group that we can work with. Here's a bunch of professionals that we could work with.
You want to grow. So you want to grow. This is an offering in a sense. Is that right? To dissident filmmakers in Hollywood?
Yeah, I think so. I think to a degree, we want in terms of the group, we want to have fellow filmmakers who are interested in this type of project, who would be interested in working on projects that they feel that are more in alignment with how they think, or just have the working with filmmakers that are open to differences of opinion. This type of group is what we're hoping to sort of allow for, as you were talking about the front of yesteryear, this being a group where people can come together, be creative, and not worry about the current hectic, divisive cancel culture.
Oh, the front. Yeah, before we started recording, I think I told you guys about Communist Party front group. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. So we're an open group,
You're a front group but a good one.
Exactly.
Unlike the Communist Party ones. Although some of them are actually good. Some of them just were for civil rights. It's true. So 20 years or so, in the business, right?
Yeah,
and
20 years, yeah.
Working on all kinds of projects. And were you primarily, how do you guys talk about this? Were you primarily a cinematographer, primarily something at sound person? What do you do? What's your skill set?
I've been a producer, director, do a lot of editing.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of. When I say the journeyman experience, like I moved through it. There's a lot of emphasis in Hollywood to be pigeonholed into a certain job. They want to know you do a certain job, and I resisted that. I've just always been a naturally independent thinker, natural sort of dissident. I just always move against the current. And so when they're like, "Oh, if this is your career, stick with this," and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to jump to this other industry," because normally you would want to stay within one industry. If you're a feature guy, you're a feature guy. TV guy, TV guy. Music videos, unscripted television, commercials. Usually you stick within one industry with one job and you hyper focus on that, and everyone thinks of you like that. And I've always enjoyed bouncing around, trying different types of jobs, trying to become a vertically integrated filmmaker that can do it all.
It sounds like you're just a filmmaker.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker. And
you probably really love making films.
Indeed. Yeah, they're interesting. What I like about them, and this is probably why we're doing what we're doing, I like the fact that I can create a world in the cinematic sense, put it out there, and it goes on a journey on its own. Even if you're the first credit after, if you're the director or the producer, there's the golden directors of Hollywood where people are hyper aware, but generally speaking, most people don't pay attention to who directed or produced it. They just sort of experience the film, they experience that world, they experience the knowledge and the emotionality and the wisdom that they get out of it, and it becomes part of them. Mm-hmm. And I just love that that's this contained piece of human experience that we can package and put out there. And and it's very, 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 very powerful medium. Yeah, we use it mostly for entertainment and commercials, but it's far more powerful, and people I think are only just realizing that in the last decade with YouTube and whatnot.
Roger Ebert, who I have extremely mixed feelings about, nonetheless said something pretty smart. He called cinema an empathy machine or empathy factory.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
There's something about cinema. For some reason, in terms of human nature, we're hardwired to, you can't just, there's always this kind of feeling, especially in sort of the YouTube world, or it's like, well, we'll just put together a film and you put the facts in there. And if you just get the facts across to everybody, or in the political sphere, we're like, well, just get the facts across and then people will know what's the right thing to do. And we're not wired that way. For some reason, we need this thing called story. And very often we need this thing called the hero's journey, but we need to have this sort of this flow of a story with thresholds, emotional thresholds that we attach our information to, but you have to sort of use this emotion and this empathetic sort of roller coaster to open people's minds, open their hearts, and somehow that then sort of allows us to place wisdom into their hearts and into their minds.
Fantastic. And how are you going to do that in this film you're working on?
Well, jump into that. Well, I mean, I could jump right to that. Do we want to just cover Scott's world first, and then because my first thought, I want to talk about the story, that like what the data shows initially in the story, and looking at how the story emerges. But why don't we back up it a little bit and just kind of give Scott his due in terms of where he's coming from?
You mean S?
Sorry.
I've been doxxed.
We'll have.
Sorry, I'm not very good at this.
You're an infiltrator.
We can talk about that later. We can cut that out if you want.
Sure.
Well, no, I wanted to stick on that for a second. Okay. So 20 years in this industry, you are a filmmaker. First of all, you're not just sort of a cog. You're not some sort of what's it called, specialist working on one little piece of it. You love film, all aspects of it.
Indeed.
And look where you are now, my man. You're on a little podcast and you can't even show your face talking about a movie you're working on. I want to just sit with that for a second. I mean, this is where we are, right? To get the movie made, you have to do this, because what we're doing is trying to raise money for this movie. And to do that, you have to come on here and you can't even show your face and you can't even use your first name. That's where we are. And
that's where we are.
And it's because you want to do a movie that's the kind of movie that used to be celebrated, as I said earlier, in Hollywood, but should be celebrated, but certainly should be allowed, if not celebrated. It's simply an investigative, critical analysis of public policy. That's it. I mean, isn't that, I mean, you must feel, what do you feel about all that?
To be honest, I'm not surprised. It's something, since I've been in Los Angeles for over 20 years, I could sort of see this coming. And there's also the aspect of, generally speaking, typically when you're trying to create a film, you would do so, the sort of the IP sort of taking it easy, making sure you're not putting it out there too readily. There's sort of a nature of always playing it close to the chest, I guess, is sort of the culture of Hollywood. So there's that aspect. Yeah, it's an odd time. It's I spent a little time.
Are you sad about it?
Yeah, I am sad about it. I feel as if people have been hugely misled by the medium itself, because we've replaced critical thinking and well-reasoned sort of people kind of coming to their own opinions on how they feel about the world through rote repetition of within film, television, news, media, YouTube and whatnot. I mean, the modern media, new media world, where it's just, there's so much repetition and everyone just, I mean, I don't really see people having discussions anymore. They're just regurgitating the same talking points back and forth at each other. And if you deviate from that, it's like, it's all just sort of a variation on taste great, less filling at a stadium, where the people have picked their side and sort of get thrilled to hold the line sort of almost arbitrarily. I understand that people feel very strongly, and the fear of COVID has driven this new level of intensity into this world. But it's to circle back what you said. Yeah, it's a very disconcerting world that we're in, and the fact that I have a lot of faith and hope for new media rising up and the decentralization of media out of Hollywood. And that there's more and more, as effectively what I feel is more and more support groups in different industries are growing that can support its own audiences, its own platforms. And we're just kind of in the sort of rocky period of transition.
Back to your credentials. I forgot to get to this. So talk about some of the projects that we have heard of that you've been a part of, so we know that you're real.
I can share some of that from the
I'd like to hear from both of you, but yeah, what are some of the bigger projects that we've heard of that you guys have worked on?
Well, in part to protect our anonymity, an aspect of how we'd like to share that is from the group, because we're two members of a group. So, amongst our group, we have people who've worn hats such as director, editor, screenwriter, composer, music supervisor, broadcast journalist, and amongst those various hats, we've contributed to quite a few different projects, which include the film Crazy Rich Asians, Fast and Furious franchise, Gone Girl, Despicable Me, Dateline NBC, The Today Show, Magnum PI, and clients across the entertainment industry spectrum. We've got Disney, Warner Brothers, A&E, Discovery, and the list goes on. But we've been working really decades amongst us in the entertainment industry in a lot of different capacities.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's impressive. And I actually like a lot of those films, by the way, a lot. I'm a huge Fast and Furious fan, by the way, something no one knows about me until now. So the question I kind of threw you, I kind of derailed you with is, how are you going to generate empathy in the audience, right? With this film. And I was assuming that you're going to tell the stories of people who were affected by the lockdowns. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't so much a derail. It was just sort of wanting to give as is due. But well, first and foremost, what I'm looking forward to doing is really looking at the data and seeing what stories emerge from the data first and foremost.
Okay.
There's been and then comparing it to the established narrative. I mean, the numbers we're bringing in a number of folks who've been looking very closely at it. And I mean, do you want to give us a description of Ian Miller's inspiration to this, or?
Sure. So Ian Miller is somebody who's been doing a lot of charts comparing the data across various areas in the country and the world.
Okay.
And his charts very clearly show a pattern that there is virtually no difference between areas that have locked down and have had mask mandates versus those that haven't. And so that's a major piece of what we want to show in this documentary. And we'll do that with animated graphics that really bring it to life and make it easily discernible, so that the audience gets that kind of at a gut level.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'd like the data itself to have a not just be sort of a statistical analysis, but a way of bringing the numbers to your average viewer. So like, oh, well, that's what happened in terms of the numbers. Right now, if you look at, I mean, everything's sort of been, it's all about how it's interpreted. And we have a number of scientists involved that we'd like to sort of take a look at this stuff, primarily Nick Hudson from Panda, who's been looking at this, and it's like, these interpretations are not correct, or these interpretations are hyperbole or well out of place, or they're omitting huge swaths of what's going on to justify their own narrative, and then in turn justify their own policies.
And who is Nick Hudson?
He's a co-founder of Panda, which is Pandemic Analytics and Data, or Data and Analytics, and they have done great work in really looking closely at the data and putting out a clear picture.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a South African fellow,
and he'll be featured. He's featured in your trailer.
Yes,
indeed.
Okay. And you haven't reached out to him yet, though.
We have. Yeah, he's basically on board with the project, and
great.
Is excited to be involved.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I didn't know that part. Okay, so you got him, and then Ian Miller, is he a scientist?
No, he's somebody that did quite a bit of studying of statistics and information, and this kind of hit him out of the blue. He just started crunching the numbers from the CDC and WHO, putting them into Excel spreadsheets, and he has his perspective, but he really approached it from a situation of curiosity. He was like, let's see what these numbers show. And every time we talked with him the other day, every time he looked at it showed the story that the policies don't add up to what the politicians were promising.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting, you ask the question, is he a scientist? And that's a piece of what we want to approach with this project too, is the myth of expertise, the myth of authority. We're not against experts. Obviously we need experts, but there is an idolatry that we see of people having letters behind their name that then we must do whatever they say. And that's something that we really want to challenge at a pretty fundamental level.
Nice. I have noticed that. Well, I had Ivor Cummins on this show.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
Great example of this, right? I don't think he's trained formally in science, but he's one of the leading experts on COVID and the effects of the lockdowns and masking and all that. Yeah, but he's not a doctor. He's not a scientist. And so it's tough, right? For our side, we do have some scientists though, although I would say the people who are really in front of this are not. They're people like Ivor and Ian Miller and Nick Hudson. Although we do have the Great Barrington Declaration, which was authored by 3 scientists in this field exactly, who are at Oxford, Stanford, and Harvard. Not bad. So are you going to deal with the Great Barrington Declaration authors as well?
We will certainly approach that. We'll have to see about our interviews. We haven't talked with any of those 3 yet, but we certainly would like to have at least one of them on as a representative of their perspective.
We've got lots of news coming from our brother and sister, Carlos and Vanessa Abelar of Paloma Verde CBD. First of all, they have a gorgeous new website. Go to palomaverdecbd.com. That's the new site. You'll see all their old products that you love, plus a bunch of new ones, and a brand new bundle that is now my current favorite, and a favorite I've been told among unregistered listeners. A lot of you apparently have been buying this. It's called the Paloma Verde Sleep Bundle, and it includes their salve, and this I've been touting for a long time. It's wonderful for your skin, and the CBD gets into your system as well. Also, they include this, which I was so excited. It's one of their newest products. It's a melatonin CBD hybrid product that comes in the sleep bundle. This alone is a wonderful addition to your sleep regimen. And then also my very favorite thing, their high potency, fast acting tincture. You put a few drops under your tongue. And for me, my anxiety and my insomnia melt away. So again, go to palomaverdecbd.com, check out their new website, use the discount code RENEGADE to get 25% off every single product in their store. They still have the THAD pack, otherwise known as the Unregistered Combo Pack. That includes the tincture I just told you about, their delicious fruit-flavored gummies, which have CBD in them. They have 10 milligrams of CBD in each gummy, and I eat these like crazy. I've told you guys that before. And they're soft gels. Regular soft gels come in a THAD pack. Those are my 3 favorite products. You get that, all of that, 33% off. Go to palomaverdecbd.com. Use the discount code RENEGADE. Get your 25% off deal. Get 33% off the THAD pack. Check out the sleep bundle. Everybody loves it. Change your life, make your body better, feel better, and I thank you. Right. Okay, so you're going to have the data. You're going to have very cool looking animation, right?
Yeah, and one of the things to mention too is we have a sort of a 2-phase process. So that's why the phase 1, we were actually wanting to we're creating a 20 to 30 minute short, which will be kind of jump starting the analysis of the data as well as the animations and sort of the more hard hitting on the science side, just to kind of get the foundation in place.
Right.
And so that's where our primary focus is. We're sort of putting those communities together, and then sort of phase 2 is towards the full feature film. And so bringing it around to the original question about we're wanting to look at the emotional stories of people whose lives have been severely disrupted and destroyed by the policies.
Yeah.
There's people who have not received, critical medical care, children who have lost precious time developing skills to pursue their dreams, children who are suffering mentally because of the confines of being stuck at home. I mean, I always depress myself when I think about the supposed amounts of child abuse that are going on that we're going to just be discovering and mass sort of culture-wide trauma that we'll be dealing with for years. years to come as it comes to light, and let alone elderly who have died alone in nursing homes and unable to connect with their families. So there's the stories go on, and we're actually in the middle. If you go to our website at soundmindcreativegroup.com, there's a portal where we're asking people to submit stories. So we're in the research phase. We're looking for those stories that really reflect where this remedy of lockdowns far exceeded any sort of benefit as claimed by the policymakers. And we feel that if we take these numbers, bring them to life, and then contrast them with these human stories, human interest stories, human suffering stories, in fact, that where it's not just a matter of sitting down and like getting, oh, I felt terrible. It's like sitting them down, learning who they are, what kind of lives they were leading, what kind of dreams they were pursuing, what kind of doer they were. I mean, we're Ian Miller, for instance, he's not, you asked if he's a scientist, he's a doer. Hollywood's all about people who do. If you accomplish anything in Hollywood, if you finish a film, even if it's terrible, you get huge credit because you finished a film. Because hundreds of people set out to make films, very few are ever completed. And so this whole idea of individuals who have the chutzpah and the tenacity to do and create and make things happen have a lot of cultural capital, and a lot of people gravitate towards them. Now in Hollywood, we call those people producers or any form of creative. I feel that there's all kinds of natural doers, all kinds of natural sort of like people with strong, who have sort of the American spirit, who were living their lives and were playing the game appropriately within the rules. And these policies came along, and their ability to take risks were sort of ripped out from underneath them, and in terms of their relationship to communicative diseases. And these policies saying you have to stop everything you're doing, you have to duck and cover in place, as in terms of linking it to the old propaganda versus the new propaganda. And we feel that these stories, which I'm sure people are getting more and more used to them, seeing more and more of them in the news here and there, but we feel if we find the right ones that really reflect, like, the numbers said this, that the numbers really reveal a different narrative than was proposed by the policymakers. The policymakers imposed the lockdowns and the mask mandates, and let's see what that did to the average person, these people who were living their lives and had this devastating, where the policies far exceeded what the disease ever could have done to them. In all due respect to those who lost people from the disease, the numbers are tiny in comparison to the economic losses. And
so of course that's going to be the problem for you guys, because what will happen with every word you utter, you will hear, what about the 500,000 people?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And what do you have to say to that?
One thing that they have done at Panda, I think it may have even been the origination of their organization, was they created a study to estimate the number of human life years that were lost as a result of these policies. And I don't remember what it is, but it's in the millions of life years that have been lost as a result of this. So, it does come down to kind of like a suffering match. Who suffered more? How much suffering, one side or the other. And I think, it's very clear when you really look at the losses, that there's much more loss from authoritarian top-down approaches to solving this crisis.
The lockdowns, government action did more damage to people and their lives than the pandemic, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Pretty radical. I hope you're right. Because that's what I think, and that's why I'm doing this, and I'm really supporting your film. So let's talk about you for a second. We didn't talk about you much.
Sure.
How long have you been in the business? Well, you did talk about what kinds of projects you've worked on, but talk about filmmaking and your experience with it, and why do you do it? Why do you care?
Yeah, well, I've been in the business a little over 20 years myself. My hat is, I consider myself a filmmaker, although my profession is more in a niche area. I won't reveal that, because I think that may give me away more than A's profession did. But I have been involved in all kinds of projects across the board, and I feel like film is such a powerful medium for changing people's hearts and minds. I certainly, from my own experience, some of the major pivotal points in my life have been through experiencing a work of art. I've pivoted. I've had a renewed sense of my mission. I've had my mind changed. I mean, there have been works of art that I've experienced, and it gave me a new way of looking at the world, and has changed major decisions in my life. So I feel like that's part of what drew me to it to begin with, and it's certainly been a part of the animating principle behind my work over the last couple of decades.
You know, I have been thinking for a while, and I've been talking about this with a friend of mine who's also in Hollywood. He's a first director. You know, I mentioned earlier sort of the 70s, the golden age of cinema, it's called, right? And I think it is. And one of the reasons is what I said earlier, is that there was a lot of political frankness that has never existed in Hollywood before or since, right? So for me, I think the greatest film of that era, from my perspective, according to my values and my political interests, is Apocalypse Now. And yet, I don't think that kind of movie could be made now. Number one, because people don't care about war anymore. And number two, it's a movie that's critical of actually the liberal establishment, because the liberal establishment created Vietnam. So, and that's certainly what you guys are doing. You're simply taking on the liberal establishment here, aren't you?
I think that's largely true. I mean, I think the establishment that we're taking on with this project, though, is broader than the liberal establishment, because certainly while the major pushback against the lockdowns and mask mandates has come from the right, certainly from my own experience, there are a lot of people on the right who bought into the fear, who have taken the same kinds of precautions or have felt the same urgency at making other people take the precautions.
Like who? Who are you talking about? Who on the right has supported? Because
well, I'm just talking about in my life in general. I mean,
I know that there are actually significant number of prominent libertarians, of all people, who have supported the lockdowns, which shocked me. I know that a lot of people at the Cato Institute, for instance, I don't know if you know this, supported the mask mandates, I think, as vigorously as the Democratic Party did, which was amazing to me. Reason Magazine, who I'm very close to, I've done a lot of work with them. They're libertarian as well. They also, they've been critical, certainly critical, but they haven't been as critical as the three of us of the lockdowns. And
well, even President Trump gave mixed messages about
even Trump, right? That's right, even Trump. So yeah, I hear you. It's not just a liberal phenomenon, but I would say it's primarily a liberal phenomenon. And you know, if you just go into a liberal city, like I live in the Bay Area, so if you go into Berkeley or San Francisco, everybody's wearing a mask. But if you drive into the suburbs, which tend to be more red Republican, you'll see fewer and fewer masks the further you get into red country, right?
Sure.
Well, that's because they don't believe in science.
Well, of course, yes, because they're a bunch of rednecks who don't even know what science is. So, okay. God, what are we going to do here? How are we going to get this made? How much do you need? And how much money do you need to get this done? And how much have you already raised?
So we have phases in this.
Okay.
Our first goal in order to get the short completed is 100,000. Our current fundraiser is for 300,000, which will enable us to get the short finished and give us a good foundation for momentum on the long form documentary. Ultimately, we're going to need upward of $500,000 in order to do the long form documentary well.
Yep.
So right now we're at just above 65K.
Okay.
So we're approaching a quarter of our current goal.
Okay.
And we've had very good momentum, and that we're about 2.5-3 weeks into our fundraising efforts. So that's been a empowering beginning. We've been been excited by the kinds of comments we've gotten from the people who've donated and the flood of donations that have occurred. But we have a journey to go.
6 years ago, I was suffering from severe anxiety and panic disorder. I had gone through many years of psychotherapy, but it had never made me feel any better. So a friend of mine recommended that I put this app on my phone called Headspace and give it a try. They gave me a free 1-month trial, which is what we're offering to you now for a serious discount. And I did. And after one session, just one, I felt my body change as if my chemistry had changed. I felt my relationship to the world and to myself transform almost immediately. And I noticed, and have noticed for the last 6 years, that every day I use Headspace, I feel better, and it's a better day. It's one of the most remarkable transformations I've ever gone through psychologically. It has helped me more than anything I've ever done, more than 10 years of psychoanalytic psychotherapy. I have been telling my friends ever since then to try Headspace, and many have, and many now consider it to be essential to happiness and a good life. Headspace trains you to be here and now in the moment, present in your own body and in the immediate space around you. It trains you to keep out all these thoughts of fear and anxiety and sadness that haunt you for much of the day. It gives you, in a sense, a space of freedom, and I would say also pleasure, because I'm now able to enjoy life, enjoy the world around me, whereas before there was often this screen of anxiety and fear between me and the rest of the world. Headspace has changed my life over the last 6 years. It is also scientifically proven, according to many, many studies by scientists, people who use Headspace and meditate using mindfulness have less anxiety, less stress, less tension, less depression. So, right now, you have a chance to change your life in a similar way. And from the bottom of my heart, I recommend this product like no other. In fact, I told my producers when we first started this show 3 years ago that it would be my dream to one day have a sponsor in Headspace. I was beyond thrilled when they asked. So go to headspace.com/renegade to get a free 1-month trial, free. Give it a try. And I'd like to hear how you like it. Email me at unregisteredpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's headspace.com/renegade. One more time, headspace.com/renegade for your free 1-month trial that I can virtually guarantee you will change your life for the better. You deserve to feel better, to be happier, to be more serene, to be more in the moment, to be more inside of your body. Please do it. Headspace.com/renegade and let me know how it goes for you. Thank you so much. Man, I gotta tell you, look, my life over the last year and a half, it's been hard for everyone, of course, but when you live in a place like the Bay Area, as I do through this, which has been the most locked down place on earth, and have ideas about the lockdowns and the pandemic that I share with you guys, I have felt utterly alone. Utterly, I mean, I generally feel pretty alone in the world and especially around here, but now that the masking, and I've refused to wear it outside, so the masking is now this signifier. So people, but when they see me, they know that I have aberrant, terrible thoughts, and I'm probably a racist and a Klan member and a Trump supporter and the rest of, and a pedophile. So, it's been awful. It's been really, really awful in two ways. One is just what everybody's experienced, but then for us dissidents, there's been that added level of ostracism, loneliness, and feeling shamed. I mean, I've been yelled at 15 times. Yes, I count. 15 times for not wearing a mask outdoors. And in almost every case, I was on a hiking trail.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. A hiking trail.
You get the dramatic when they sort of stop turn their backs on you as you pass by. They're sort of like,
Oh, yeah.
not that protocol was ever suggested by anyone, but these sort of de facto shaming body language that just became the norm. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've had this is hiking trails because that's the only exercise I could do was hike. So I've done a lot of hiking. Thank God I happen to live here. But yeah, I can't tell you. I mean, I'm talking 100 times, maybe 200 times. I've seen people on a hiking trail like get off the trail when they see me coming and turn, as you just said, turn their backs to me in this dramatic way, and it's so absurd. And this is the thing is, guys, this is the San Francisco Bay Area. The most highly educated, wealthiest place you will ever find. Everybody went to college here. Half the people have advanced degrees. Half the people have advanced degrees in science. Go Berkeley. That's where the University of California is, right? You go there and clearly no one knows anything about science because everyone's wearing masks all alone in their cars and outside. So what do you think this is? Well, first of all, let me just say, this is why I'm so supportive of this project, because I need help. I need psychological help. I need there to be more data points in the world in my favor so that I can feel less crazy, so that I can point to something when people challenge me or shame me or yell at me on a hiking trail. I need to say, there's this movie you should watch. And it's made by professional, very accomplished filmmakers who have worked on major projects, who are very smart guys. And I just would like for you to watch it. That's why I need this done. That's why you're here.
Yeah, and what you're bringing up is an important aspect of what we intend to do with a long form documentary, which is to really get into how did this happen? How is it possible that people so quickly and willingly gave up their rights? And I don't know that we really have those answers yet at our fingertips. I think that will evolve as we work on it. I mean, we know that part of it is the use of language, the use of fear mongering, the use of selective data, so that people got into a state of fear and basically shut off their critical faculties.
Well, and I'll reinforce it. I think everything you just said, Thad, and to reinforce what S just said about, I think we are really understanding the power of fear as an emotion. We're talking about empathy and as a film, as a film medium, and that fear is a very, very powerful emotion that can suspend people's cognitive abilities. And you're witnessing it. And the fear was so thick and applied so professionally and so universally without any ability to question. I mean, another major hurdle for this film is we're going to effectively be asking people to admit that they were wrong about certain things. And that just people dig their heels in. They'd rather confront, they'd rather disagree, argue, dehumanize anyone who's trying to suggest that they might be wrong, rather than face the possibilities that they were wrong and that might have been fear motivated. There's a lot of shutting down of human nature through fear, and or well trodden uses of fear by statist organizations to keep the populations in line. I mean, the Cold War is just rife. I mean, that's the history of the Cold War, was the use of fear to keep the populations under control. And I think we're seeing lots of very similar methodologies being used on our population now. And the way that sort of it's for the good of the collective versus you must comply for the good of the collective. The individual no longer matters.
Right.
You wear a mask for everybody else, not for yourself.
So that's not about fear though, right? That's about morality. That's about selflessness. So it's confusing, and I never know.
But it's presented as such, but fear, but the underlying foundation behind it is fear. The fear that you will die, like it's like you would be responsible for someone else's death, or that the inherent sort of fear of death that we all have. It's sort of fundamentally kind of grasping at that and then building a moral argument on top of it, which I don't think is valid.
You know what might be even more powerful than the fear of death? The fear of social ostracism. And I think that's another fear that's driving the wearing of masks when you're all alone outdoors. Things like that.
Yeah. Well, there's multiple levels, right? So I'd say that's the 21st century version of what we saw in the yesteryear with the use of fear, and the social ostracism. I think is absolutely key, because it's the mass use of shaming,
Hmm.
and without the ability to question it. And we want to also look at where, I mean, it's perfectly legitimate to look at where were these policies wrong. Let's say, I mean, just in a world where perhaps these policies were right in line with the data. I mean, just if there was some sort of, it's not going to be 100% correct. Where is the space just to even question it and make improvements upon what was learned? And that's that, even that window isn't open.
Right.
So if we're not even allowed to question for the good of standard, what worked, what didn't, make a decision, make some changes, move on, and it's actually turned into this giant shaming mechanism in which you're not allowed to question it at all whatsoever, and the evidence and the data may not even support the policies that were implemented. You know, what kind of world are we living in? What kind of world do we have where individuals who want to tell stories, individuals who want to ask questions, individuals who want to have simple debate as to what's best and how we move forward as a people, what kind of, we don't have space for that anymore. And that's what we want to find. That's what we want to try and blow a little bubble up and allow people to step into that and think about it that way.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's all great. I just got to say, and you know, I'm obviously 100% behind this project. And I do have hopes for it, but I have to say, and this has nothing to do with you guys or your project, I'm depressed about the prospects for the project in terms of its reception and what kind of impact it can actually have. And that has nothing to do. I think if you guys made the best documentary in history, I still worry that much, if not most, of the American population, at least, will ignore, dismiss, or deride it. What are your thoughts? I mean, do you think you're trying to make a film that will appeal, I hope, I assume, potentially to any American, right? To any American who understands English should be able to watch this film and empathize with it and be moved by it to some extent. Is that correct? Is that what you're aiming for?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, a large part of our mission is to make this as accessible to anybody in the mainstream as possible, because we really do want it to have an impact, not just to be a flash in the pan and then die a death in the documentary hole that so many go down. And I think, you know, that a large part of the conversation we've already had and that we will be having in the months to come is how do we present this in a way that brings people into it rather than pushes people away.
Right.
I mean, we see it as like a good conversation. You don't have a conversation with somebody that you're trying to convince of somebody and come at them and say, you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. Here's the list of the reasons that what you say doesn't make sense. And there's a fine line we're going to have to walk in terms of presenting the data in a way that draws people in rather than alienates them. And you know, our hope, it may be entirely delusional, but our hope is that by walking that line carefully, we may be able to get it onto a mainstream platform. It's also the case that a year from now, we'll see how things go. It may be that critiquing the lockdowns may not be as reprehensible as it is at this moment in time.
True.
So there might be an opening there for it to be a little more acceptable and thus, you know, hit more people.
No, that is true. In the last, I'd say, month or so, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this, mainstream liberal outlets and even some non-mainstream, very liberal outlets like The Atlantic have been writing articles, publishing articles, criticizing liberals for being silly about wearing masks when they're vaccinated and things like that, right? And now calling into question Fauci's role in the origins of the virus and doing things that were absolutely forbidden just a couple months ago. So there does seem to be some opening. Maybe it's because I live in the Bay Area and I see nothing but zombies around me, but I get very depressed about that. I just don't. There's clearly a lot of people in this country. I mean, there are people who are saying, according to these articles, there are a significant number of people in this country who are saying that they will wear masks no matter what, even when the virus is gone, I guess. I mean, that they will always wear masks because they like it.
Ugh.
And I think you need to wrap your head around why people like it. And it would be good, by the way, for you to get to talk to some of those people on camera, maybe, you know, what is it? Put your empathy lens on them. You know, the people who are not doing it for virtue signaling, the people who are doing it for virtue signaling, fuck them. I mean, I think you can basically just show them virtue signaling, show that that's what they're in it for, and then fuck them. We don't need to deal with that. But I do think there are many people who are legitimately just afraid. I know this. I know this. I know I've known many. I know a woman breaks my heart. She's not a good friend, but she's good friend of a friend, and she's been in almost total isolation. She's single. She's a young woman in her 40s, I think. She's single, and she's deathly afraid of the virus. So she really truly has not or did not leave her house for a year. And when we invited her over for dinner, this was just a couple months ago, she broke down in tears because it was the first time she'd had any real social interaction in a full year. And I know that she's one of millions and millions of people just in this country. Mm-hmm. So just a suggestion, I don't know, think about it, but maybe I hope you don't mind. I hope this doesn't come off as too narcissistic, but I've actually been thinking about a project that I've been working on, which is completely different than yours, but I think it might help you think through this. It might help me think through this too. So I'm writing this book in which one of the arguments I'm making is that the Holocaust was in large part caused or made to happen by U.S. policy, by U.S. intervention in World War II. Okay, so crazy, terrible, horrible thing to say. And so the reason what I do is, in making the argument, I make it very, very clear that I am not only not anti-Semitic, but that I am on the side of the Jews who were killed. In other words, my argument is that the people who were killed in large part because of what the United States did. Mm-hmm. So in other words, it's not an anti-Semitic argument that the Nazis were okay and Hitler was misunderstood and all that. I'm saying people were killed. It's just the cause of it is misunderstood, right? So what I do is I make that very clear in those chapters, mm-hmm. that I'm on the side of those who were killed, right? And I express tremendous empathy toward them. And I try to write the story from their perspective, from Jews who were killed, who were saying at the time, if the US intervenes in this war, we're going to die, which is what happened in Berlin. Many Jews were saying that. And that's what I argue. So I'm just suggesting maybe to put people who were killed by this, who died because of it, in a way at the center of the story and really honor them because it's real. And also say that different policies might have actually saved them because the lockdowns, it has been argued, killed more people by forcing them inside, where we know something like 3/4 of the transmissions take place are inside. And then especially in closed situations, indoor situations where there are a lot of old people, namely nursing homes. Yeah. Right. And so if we'd had the Great Barrington Declaration policy of focused protection, of focusing all of our social and cultural resources on protecting old people and obese people and people with diabetes, the people we knew who were basically the only people who were truly vulnerable to this in terms of death, they may very well have, many of them may have survived this, probably would have.
You know, and an aspect of that too, I heard Nick Hudson saying this the other day, is that this emphasis on asymptomatic people being carriers was really the justification for all of the lockdowns. And the science of that is his point was that there may be some truth to it, but it's so marginal that it's statistically unimportant. And the kind of in line with what you're saying, people who were carriers and were asymptomatic carried it in such low doses that it actually serves as an inoculant, so that people could be exposed to it and develop immunity. And so all of the lockdowns, all of the mask wearing prevented that kind of immunity from happening in the broader populace. Mm-hmm. So as a result, more people died as a result of the policies. And I think, like you're saying, that's a very important story to be told.
Yeah. Take your cameras into nursing homes if you can. That would be amazing.
I think it's a fabulous idea, and what you were saying earlier about why is this film going to be seen? You're depressed about it. I mean, I think it's very important to make a film that is our historical entry into the record. Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea of for your book, for instance, I mean, there's a reason why everyone knows about the Holocaust. I mean, the Jewish peoples are a storytelling culture, mm-hmm. and they make sure that story is written down and passed along through the generations. And in this case, the Germans were very good at writing things down as well. So we had both sides of the story. And however, there's a lot more history in the world. And so often only one side writes this story down, or really most of the world has the why remember the past?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to remember the past. And we have this normalcy of all kinds of atrocities happening all over the globe that no one's ever even heard of, let alone have a convenient word to describe it as the Holocaust. And we want to make a film that is our entry into the historical record. It may not be a big hit right away. It may not have the legs that we would like to see to alleviate your depression, or people like, the
Mm-hmm.
loneliness you feel. Hopefully you watch it and don't feel quite so alone, but
Mm-hmm.
knowing that once this film exists, it's going to exist 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, a century, multiple centuries from now. And it may very well be a counterpoint. That's a very important counterpoint to have in the record. And so that's, for me, that's a big driving force. I want to capture this story and keep it part of the record.
And I would add to that
Yes.
in saying that a piece of what we intend to do with the long form project is to make the point that no matter how severe this crisis was, let's say that they were right from the beginning about the number of potential deaths. Let's say that they were right that lockdowns and mask mandates, or let's put it a different way. Let's say they were right that social distancing was an important solution.
Mm-hmm.
Top-down authoritarian solutions don't solve this kind of crisis. Only people on the ground figuring out what's working, trying different things and failing, trying different things and succeeding solves the crisis. So it's beyond this particular situation and solution. And I think it's very important that we make that point for posterity.
I have a feeling you've read Friedrich Hayek.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about is it called the distance problem? That's what you're referring to, right? That central authorities far away from
the knowledge problem.
Knowledge
right?
problem, or
yes.
Yeah, I've heard both. It's
okay.
Knowledge across distance, I guess. Problem.
Sure.
That people in Washington D.C. can't possibly know what's going on with people in San Diego well enough to govern them.
Yeah, the reason that markets work is because it's decentralized knowledge. The knowledge doesn't exist in any one head, and it can't. People make choices and solutions arise, and that leads to abundance, prosperity, and
wait a minute. Yeah, hold on now. You guys, you're saying that the government shouldn't have done anything? Governments, no government should have done anything? Come on.
If it's between that and what they did, yeah, we would be a lot better off if they had done nothing. I mean, this is a personal statement and not necessarily representative of our group, but I feel like if there's anything that they could have done, it would have been to help scientists make clear what was going on, to encourage people to take care of their immune systems and wash their hands. To my mind, that's about the best that they could do and actually help in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. And Mr. A, do you agree with that radical position?
Well, I know it's sort of I'm thinking it through. It makes for a dramatic pause, I suppose. Where I like to put my focus on is the language that was used. That they used the basic forms of repetition. They would pick a policy, stick with it, and regardless of where the winds seemed to be going in terms of the knowledge, they just stuck to their guns that no, this is the policy. We're not deviating from it. And I have a real problem with that. I'd like to see an intelligent government, learn from its own population and have that relationship. I mean, I to what Scott's saying, yes, I see the absolute pitfalls of government dictating what they think is best, regardless of what the ground's telling them. And so yeah, I just want to see the proper debate and the proper transparency happening, so that policy is informed in a way that is obvious to everyone, rather than an edict that we're forced to follow.
Great. Yeah. Okay. The thing you said earlier about, if nothing else, you will have entered this into the historical record. that will be a major victory, major accomplishment, and it's not only important from my point of view, it's necessary. So that alone, if you do nothing but accomplish that,
that's the driving passion. Absolutely.
Yes, if you do nothing but accomplish that, this film must be funded. It must be made. It must be made as well as possible. However, Mr. A and Mr. S, I want you to win. I want us to win. Let me say this. I can't go through this again. And I'm sure that I speak for, probably about 5 billion people or so. I can't do this again. So we need to win. So this movie needs to be as good as possible. And thank God we have actual professional filmmakers who are not shitty, ideologically driven, partisan weirdos who have minimal filmmaking skills. You guys are serious pros who know how to make it look good, sound good, feel right. You're going to tell the story of the science, or you're going to tell you're going to show the science, and then you're going to tell the stories of the science and of people. And that's the most important thing, right? To really get it across. Because look, I mean, yes, you've got to do the science, you've got to do the numbers, you got to have the really cool graphics for that. I agree. But we have that already. I mean, we are awash in that. You can turn on Twitter, and you can, even on Twitter, they still allow all that, to be on there. But to tell the stories of how people were affected, and again, I really do think you should also show how people who died were affected and their loved ones. I really want that to be in the movie as well. I want it to be really clear that your heart is with everyone who suffered. And that's from people who died and those who didn't die. Those are people who died and those who didn't get to go to school and didn't go to high school graduation and all the rest of it. Right. But you got to find people. So this comes to crowdsourcing, right? And you want people, you have a place, talk again about this, how you have a thing on your website for people who know good stories of people who were affected by lockdowns to tell the stories. Can you just go through that again?
Sure. Well, we have a website called Sound Mind Creative Group, and on this website there's a portal where we're asking people to submit stories if they feel they have a story. We just want to create a library of stories and have a repository for people to submit that. But from that, we're hoping to find those discrete stories that we feel implement exactly what you're just saying, where we reveal what the emotional journey for those who lost people to COVID, to people who lost their livelihood to the lockdowns, across the board. I mean, I think you're absolutely correct, Thad, about people have experienced a lot of emotions and people have lost loved ones, and yet it's all been so politicized as to cover it up and not really let it shine and let the lessons be learned from that loss of life. And so those are the types of stories that we're asking people to think about that they may have and submit to soundmindcreativegroup.com at the portal there. And then we're also raising funds. We have a fundraiser website. Sorry. We also have a fund for, if you could cut that later.
Yeah, I will.
We also have a fundraiser site. If you would like to give the information on that front.
Sure. So the URL for that is fundraiser.com, and that's spelled FUNDRAZR.com/follow the science.
Everyone, please go to these sites and help this project. I want to say that one of the first things that was said to me, I had a relatively cavalier attitude about this, I hate to say, back in like February and March of last year. I think even publicly said it would be all over by I think I said Easter, and then I said the summer. I was convinced the summer would wipe it out, right? And I was slightly off on that one. But a friend of mine said to me right at the very, very beginning, when I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of cool, no one's working and there's no traffic anymore, he said, this changes things forever. And I thought he was being dramatic and a little silly. And it's possible still that he's wrong. And I want to make him wrong. And again, that's why we need this movie. And we need this movie to be good. Because I don't want this to be permanent. I want this to be gone entirely from our culture. I don't want any cultural remnants of this at all.
Yeah. And another animating principle for us on this is that the governments have now seen that when you put people in a state of fear, they can get away with murder, literally.
That's, of course, if it's not this, it'll be a war. And
exactly.
This reminded me of life in wartime. It's very similar from my studies of the home front in the wars of American history. All the self-sacrifice, the basically the martial law, the police state, I mean, is very, very similar. And that's the last place I want to live. And I'm sure that's true for many people. Mm-hmm. So
let me add one last thing.
Yeah,
sure. I just want to thank you, Thad, and your listeners for bearing with us on this anonymity that we're maintaining with the SoundMind Creative Group. And we know it's somewhat unusual. I mean, part of it is our desire to kind of put a value back on privacy in general, but it's also the fact that the individuals, it's become so easy to put individuals back on their heels through things like doxing or just kind of making their lives more difficult. And so we see that as a problem and as a method that people are using to prevent projects like this from getting made. So we're making an attempt to create this, or we've created this group, SoundMind Creative Group, to allow us to see how that works for us, but also invite creatives and crew and people with stories to who see that we're taking it seriously, and we take privacy seriously and anonymity seriously. I mean, we understand that eventually there'll be basically a circle of trust. I mean, there'll be people who know who we are. We don't expect this to be rock solid, but we also understand that we're on the point, and that anyone who works with us, we want to respect their privacy to whatever degree they wish to be, and invite people to approach us for working with us.
Yeah.
That's that. We just wanted to. So thank you for working with us on that front. Appreciate
Great.
it.
Yeah. So crowdsourcing labor too. If you have some skills to contribute to this, you're looking for that too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Let me state a fact that I would hope I should be sending every single American into the streets screaming at the top of their lungs, yet no one cares. The fact is that when you make this movie and it's beautifully done, it will not be allowed on YouTube. That's a fact. And every single American should be out of their minds with rage and terror because of that fact. That we can't even criticize public health policy. Public health policy. This isn't even about criminal justice. This isn't about war. This isn't about exposing some corrupt politician. This is simply public health policy. It will not be allowed on YouTube, no matter how good it is. I don't know. That's so terrible. That's so terrible. And no one cares.
And what's even more frightening about that is that it's not a government policy.
No.
And that people see what's happening and are willing to just sit back and take it.
Exactly. So how are you going to distribute it?
Well, a piece of our budget,
probably
a substantial piece of our budget, will go toward hiring an accomplished PR person who's going to help us navigate those waters, figure out where it can be. I mean, like I said earlier, our goal is hopefully to get it onto a mainstream platform. We'll see if that's possible a year from now. The short film, I think we'll find ways to get that out there. That will be a more viral phenomenon. But we need to have somebody on board who can really help us figure that out.
And to maybe push back against the depressive nature of how you framed it. I mean, you were likely correct on the YouTube front. We'll make the attempt. However, I would see that as an opportunity, because YouTube wasn't around 20 years ago, whenever it was founded, and that's the type of hubris that brings down major corporations and major organizations. And maybe this is an opportunity for new platforms, new centers of media production. Production groups, production cities, production industries to form, rise up, and be the next YouTube.
In that regard, I would pitch Odyssey
Yes.
We'll see where that goes, but it seems like it's the next promising alternative.
Yeah.
Yes, we are moving to Odyssey, or at least we're going to mirror
Fantastic.
everything on Odyssey. Yeah,
Yes.
we're going to have all of our videos on Odyssey as well, including this one. Eventually.
I mean, with the metaphor of the Phoenix, I mean, things might be, we may be aware of things burning, but I have a lot of faith in things rising from the ashes. And if we can be part of that, we'd be excited to do so.
That was a brilliant statement, A. I love that. And thank you for ending on a high note instead of my low depressive note.
No problem.
I just want to say thank you guys. And I want to tell you to get the fuck back to work because we need this movie done. So thank you for coming on and go make it.
Thank you, Thad. Yeah, thanks, appreciate it.
And everybody listening and watching, go to the website. It'll be in the show notes. It'll be in the description. Click that link, go there, donate. Tom Woods donated $10,000, my good friend, by the way. And you've made significant money already. So people know this is a real project. This is going to be one of the most important cultural projects in many, many years. And this needs to be done. And I am so grateful you're doing it. So everybody watching and listening, help these guys. Tell stories. Give them money. If you've got skills to donate, do that. And again, thanks a lot, guys. ANS, and stay safe, stay secret. Don't let the bastards get you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Amen.
All right. Good luck.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To join the new Renegade University, go to renegadeuniversity.com. To join the new Unregistered Underground, the supporting listeners group for the podcast, go to unregisteredunderground.com. Thanks for listening.